The HOA president called the cops on me for cleaning my own solar panels. Big mistake. Flashing red and blue lights washed over the house as I stood frozen on the ladder, staring down at the officers below. She had no idea who she was dealing with. No clue that the man she just tried to humiliate was the circuit court judge who signs off on her house's own legal filings. "Step down, sir," one of them shouted. Papers flapped in the wind. Behind them, the HOA president stood there smirking, her sunglasses hiding everything but her satisfaction. Imagine that, being treated like a criminal on your own property. For washing the panels that power your house, the silence that followed felt heavier than the air itself, a slow heartbeat pulsing in my ears. But here's the thing about power. When you know the law better than the people abusing it, you don't raise your voice, you wait. And when you strike, you end them with a single signature. So stay till the end, because what started with soap and sunlight ended with the entire HOA begging for mercy. I never imagined a quiet Sunday morning could turn into a legal nightmare. The sound of running water from my hose was the only thing I heard before the shouting began. The HOA president, Ms. Cleary, was standing at the end of my driveway, arms folded, phone in hand. She looked like she owned the street. Maybe in her mind she did. I was just cleaning my solar panels. Simple, right? But somehow she decided I was breaking a rule. I laughed at first. Then she called the cops. When the sirens echoed down the road, something inside me went still. The neighbors peeked through blinds like frightened birds. I kept holding the hose, watching the light flash off the water. Thinking about how small this moment looked compared to what it could become. Step down. "Sir," that was the first thing one of the officers said. Calm, polite but empty. I obeyed slowly, climbing down the ladder. The water pooled around my feet as I stood there in silence. Cleary smiled, as if she had just won a battle that never existed. I told them this was my home. They said she claimed I was trespassing. I asked them, on whose land? They hesitated. It was the first time I saw doubt cross their faces. I handed them my ID, not the one with my address. The other one the badge that said, Circuit Court Judge. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the sound of the wind. I told them I'd cooperate, but that they should remember this moment. The officers apologized before they even left my yard. But Cleary didn't. She stood there, unshaken, as if her pride was stronger than any consequence. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every light in my house felt like a spotlight. Every sound from outside made my heart race. I kept hearing whispers of HOA rules in my head, imaginary voices, listing violations that didn't exist. I knew she wouldn't stop. She'd done this to others before, but this time, she picked the wrong person. The next morning, a letter was taped to my door. It wasn't official, just printed paper, but it had that tone of control. Violation notice. Unauthorized exterior cleaning activity. I read it twice. Then I laughed. The kind of laugh you make when you know you've crossed into something darker than stupidity, something malicious. I drove to the courthouse that afternoon, not to file anything, just to remind myself of the weight of the seal I carried. Justice wasn't a concept for MIT, was a weapon I'd spent years sharpening. I could feel the handle again. Still, I didn't strike. Not yet. The following week, small things started happening. Trash cans accidentally knocked over. My mailbox left open after mail delivery. Footsteps outside my window late at night, each one minor, harmless. But together, they told a story. Someone wanted me rattled. I stayed silent, observing, recording. The law taught me patience. And patience is what predators fear most. Then came the hearing notice. Cleary had filed a complaint, claiming I violated HOA policy by installing equipment without approval. Solar panels installed 3 years ago, approved in writing. But she found a loophole. Maintenance activity not covered by initial documentation. A technicality. The kind of thing only someone with too much time and too little empathy would weaponize. At that point, fear turned to strategy. I began pulling documents, timestamps, and even camera footage. I wasn't preparing to defend myself, I was building a case. A perfect one. One night, as I sat surrounded by papers, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A voice whispered, "Drop it, Judge, or we'll make sure your next hearing is your own." Then the line went dead. I looked outside. A car idled at the corner, lights off. My reflection in the window looked strange, half calm, half ghost. The darkness outside felt alive. I knew what they were trying to do. They wanted control, through fear. But they forgot. Fear doesn't work on someone who's already seen the worst of people from behind a bench. Still, started feeling the walls close in. Even the sound of the air conditioner made me flinch. My rational mind told me I was fine. My instincts told me otherwise. Then one night, my motion lights turned on by themselves. I went outside. The ladder I used that day was lying across the yard, broken in two. I hadn't touched it. The wind was still. No footprints, no noise. Just the hum of electricity from the solar panels. That was the night. I decided to act. I filed for an injunction, not for myself, but for the neighborhood. A legal order to freeze the HOA's authority until the board could be reviewed for misconduct. The shockwave hit fast. Board members started calling me, some angry, some pleading. Cleary didn't call. She sent an email. "You're making a mistake," I replied. "No, you did." Then silence. For weeks, nothing happened. The tension was almost worse than the conflict. I started noticing people avoiding me, whispering when I walked by. Power has a strange scent. It makes people both respect and fear you. Then the court date came. Cleary walked in confident, armed with binders of meaningless documents. I didn't look at her until the hearing began. When I did, her face shifted not from fear, but from recognition. She finally realized who I was, not a man cleaning panels, but the one person who could dissolve her entire position. The hearing was short, evidence clear. Her confidence crumbled in real time. The judge, my colleague, read the ruling. The HOA's powers suspended pending investigation. Cleary removed as acting president. I watched her eyes wide, hollow, as if the walls of her little kingdom had just fallen. When it ended, she passed me in the hallway. No words. Just a look, a quiet promise of something unfinished. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. My doorbell rang around midnight. No one there. Just a small envelope, plain white. Inside was a photograph of me, on the ladder, from that day. Someone had been watching from behind the trees. The edges of the photo smelled faintly of chlorine and soap. The same scent as the water from my hose. I looked out at the dark street. Every house looked asleep. But somewhere, behind one of those windows, someone was still awake, still plotting. I whispered into the night, "You started this." Then I closed the door and locked it. Before we dive deeper, make sure you're subscribed, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story about law. It's about what happens when the law turns its eye on the wrong side of power. I need you to hit that like button, not for me, but for everyone who's ever been pushed by someone who thought they were untouchable, because the next part, it gets darker. Before anything else, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I need you with me for this whole thing. If you leave now, you'll miss the part where everything goes wrong, and then worse. The photo on my porch was small and ordinary. It's the kind of print you get from an old phone camera. But the way it stared back at me felt like an accusation. Me on a ladder, soap suds on my hands, the sunlight catching the edge of a solar panel. Somebody had watched me that morning and kept the proof. The envelope was unmarked. No return, no threat scrawled across it. Just a quiet, patient reminder that someone knew exactly what I did that day. I told myself to be calm. I had seen people fall apart behind the bench. I had watched families ripped apart by whispers and by paper. I had thought the law would steady me. Instead, the law felt fragile, like a thin bridge over black water. The HOA had tried to tip me off it with a phone call and a smile. That photo was an echo of that smile. 3 nights earlier, a neighbor's porch light had gone on at 2 in the morning. I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of paperwork and a coffee gone cold. The house across the street never kept late hours. I watched the light through the blinds and thought of the ladder. I thought of soap. I thought of the tiny, almost invisible things people do to mark territory. A painted mailbox, a flower bed, a complaint form filed in the wrong box at the wrong time. It is the small, steady things that pile up until a person can't breathe. The next day, a woman I barely knew stopped me outside the courthouse and whispered, "Careful. People notice. They talk." Her eyes flicked past me as if the street itself might be listening. I nodded. I wanted to tell her I had made a mistake in the past. There were rulings. I'd written that it'd ruined people's lives, but this time it wasn't about punishment. This time, it felt personal. The HOA's filings were thin and tidy. They claimed technical violations, missing approvals, an unauthorized alteration to the exterior. They called it maintenance without notice. It was the kind of dry legal language meant to hide intent. But when you sit through enough hearings, you can read intent in the margins. Their petitions smelled like a campaign not to fix issues, but to control. I read their words and saw a map of small cruelties. I began to follow threads. Names cross-referenced with dog-eared minutes from meetings. Emails with urgent stamped in bold. A vendor who got hired for a fence job, then never came, then got a check. The more I looked, the more the pattern grew. A board that used rules as teeth. A president who loved being feared once. When I was young and still thought the law was a cathedral, I believed people argued for truth. Now I watched a woman argue for control, and I realized how easily a town can be run like a private court. Her power came from 100 unnoticed things neighbors who would rat at the slightest affront. A condo community fed on petty rules, a handful of signatures that made her decisions final. That's what terrified me. Not the single phone call that morning, but that web of small obedience. Someone left a key under my doormat the week after the hearing. I didn't find it at first. It sat like a secret under the rubber edge of the mat for 2 days while I tried to act normal. I have keys in my life I don't use. The courthouse door, the evidence room, the chest in the attic with boxes of old rulings. I opened the small lockbox in the attic and found another photo. This one was taken from closer, the angle low, as if the watcher had crouched behind a hedge. It showed my face inches from the panel, focused and unafraid. In the corner of the frame, the HOA president's sunglasses reflected the world like black coins. The note attached said nothing. A single sentence. We saw my hands did not shake when I held that paper. They shook later in the shower, when the water hit my shoulders, and I let the coldness in. Sometimes fear is quiet at first, like a slow fog stealing across a field. Sometimes it stumbles and loud, but more often, it is the patient kind that lies in wait. The mailbox photo was patient. I called a friend from a small-town court and asked how they handled petty HOA wars. He laughed, and his laugh was not kind. Petty. That's how empires start. One small rule, then another. You step in, you blow a match near dry kindling. He did not say, "Don't go after them." He said, "Be careful. They don't quit." So I built a case. Not for myself, at least, not in the beginning. I started collecting the small things others dismissed. Security camera footage from a neighbor who had a new system installed. A ledger from the HOA clerk who had left a receipt in the trash behind a coffee shop. A voicemail with a board member saying make sure he knows his place. It was a mosaic of small cruelties. I pushed the leash a little each day. I wrote letters and filed motions that seemed bureaucratic and dull. They raised their shoulders and sent me thin, angry emails. I filed a motion to inspect the HOA's financial books. That day, one of the board members, an elderly man who always wore the same tweed jacket, came to my door and begged me to stop. His eyes were wet, pleading. He said he had a stroke last year and didn't want trouble. He thought he could stop the machine if he asked gently. I felt a small stab of pity that I couldn't afford. That was the trouble with law. It demands truth, not mercy. One night, the lights in my study snapped off. I sat in the dark and counted the seconds. 3, 2, 1. My phone buzzed. A text, "Nice try." A short video followed, a shaky 30-second clip of someone moving through the back of my property, close enough to hear the crunch of leaves. The camera paused on the ladder I'd used that morning, the ladder I'd left in the shed. The ladder lay on its side, but then, as if edited, the clip showed that ladder a moment later upright, steady, as if someone had put it back just for the camera. The sound overlay was a laugh. Not mine. Not hers. Someone else's. I began sleeping in shifts, half in the living room with the TV low, half in the bedroom with a baseball bat under the duvet. The bat was ridiculous, and I knew it. I had presided over criminal trials where the miserable found themselves cowering behind real threats, not wood. But the bat made me feel like I had done something other than pretending security. I started to notice how quiet my house could be when I wanted it to be loud. I started to answer every ring of the doorbell like the house itself could be interrogated. The board filed a countersuit. The word harassment was now applied to me. They said my inquiries had crossed lines and caused members distress. They painted me as some vengeful figure. I laughed when I read their filings because the idea of someone in their narrow world calling me vengeful felt absurd. But the laugh left a bitter taste. People believe what their neighbors whisper. Once a rumor anchors in a community, evidence shifts to fit it. You can show them records until you're blue in the face. They'll still choose the story that keeps them safe. In the middle of all of that, I had a memory flash out of sequence like a film editing trick. Years ago, before gray had touched my temples, a woman cried in my chambers. She had been evicted by a mortgage, still in limbo, her children weeping in the hall, pleading for a last night. I'd ruled the bank's paperwork insufficient. The bank threatened to appeal. They put pressure on me with letters and callous phone calls. That was how I learned that justice has a price. I had learned then to balance law and heart carefully. I had thought the balance made me steady. This time, the balance threatened to tip me into something else. Retribution. They put up signs in the neighborhood the week the court ordered an audit. Handwritten posters stapled to telephone poles. Watch out for this man. It was a grainy photo, probably taken from the same angle as the first envelope, and a line of thick black marker. Not one of us. People crossed the street to avoid me. Mail carriers left packages at the curb. The house that had once been mine felt like a stage, and I was a performer in a play I hadn't chosen. At the hearing, the room was clogged. Cleary took the podium with a paper in her hand and a practiced look of wounded civility. She spoke in small, measured sentences about safety and community. Her voice was smooth. She sounded worried for the children who played on the sidewalks. The irony of her performance stung like vinegar. I presented documents, ledgers, emails, a list of vendors who appeared on no public record. I let the facts sit on the table like stones. Stones are heavy. People notice their weight. During a recess, someone slipped a note under my door in the courthouse bathroom. We can make this stop. Forget the audit. Leave now. The hand that wrote it was neat, all capitals, like a child's scrawl trying to be serious. I flushed it down the toilet without reading twice. The paper felt like a thing used to often an old map folded and refolded until the creases are part of its life. I kept telling myself that doing things by the book would see this through. Book was a naively romantic way to think of legal procedure. Rails are meant to guide trains. They do not stop the sabotage of a track. One night, I found a small camera lodged in the crook of a tree on my property. I pried it loose with shaking fingers and brought it into the garage. It was a commercial model set to motion. I attached it to my laptop like a surgeon connecting a monitor. The footage was a slow, chilling thing. The camera had sat pointed at my driveway for days. It captured the HOA president's car rolling up late at night and stopping by the curb. The shadowed figure of a board member stepping out in a jacket, hands in pockets, as if to check the scene. The clip at 3:12 a.m. showed someone placing a small object beneath my porch light. When I slowed the footage, I could see boots. Good boots. Polished. Not the sort a man like me would buy for the yard work. I took the drive to her house that night. It was wrong, maybe illegal. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until the knuckles turned white. The streetlights painted long ovals on the pavement. Her house sat quiet, the front porch asleep under a yellow glow. I walked up the path, felt foolish and furious, and left a note on her door. It said, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. You made your choice already. I waited at home for a response that night. None came. The next morning, the news had a small story. Local homeowner harassment complaint filed by HOA leader. The world can flip. Someone paints themselves as the victim, and the cameras tilt. The town prefers stories with neat heroes and easy villains. I was neither. I was a man with a gavel and a ladder, and the mixture confused them. My mind kept sliding sideways into what-ifs. What if the person watching me wanted to force me out? What if they wanted to humiliate me enough that the bench I sat on would feel rotten under me? I started to walk with my keys between my fingers like a talisman. Sometimes power protects you. Sometimes it makes you a target. At 3 a.m, someone pounded on my front door. My heart hammered like it would rupture from the chest. I peered through the peephole and saw no one. The porch light flickered, and when I opened the door, a rush of cold air hit me. On the mat lay a child's shoe, clean and small, a strange, innocent token to leave on a judge's doorstep. I picked it up, and the inside smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I left it on the mantel like evidence. It made my house feel like a set in a dark film. They started attending my neighborhood meetings, eyes polite, smiles precise. They introduced motions to increase fines, to tighten maintenance rules, to reduce the input anyone could have in decisions. Every motion was another net thrown. They did not call it a campaign. They called it governance. People voted and nodded and believed in the safety of their small rules. One day, a woman who had once taught at the school stopped on my walk and said, "You're not the same since this started." Maybe she was right. I had always been calm in public, the man with the measured stare. Lately, my patience had edges. I had started to plot small embarrassments, a letter to a vendor about shoddy work, a public record request that showed an irregular invoice. They were not crimes, but they were stings. I wanted them to feel what it is to be watched. And then, as if someone finally grew tired of small pushes, something broke in the night. The irrigation system that watered the HOA's new flower beds erupted, spraying muddy water across their manicured lawn. It happened in slow motion. Pipes groaned, sprinklers whipped, water ran like sheets across the sidewalk. A town that prized neatness watched its pride dissolve into a muddy mess. They called it vandalism. They called it an attack. I called it a voice. But the line between justice and petty revenge had thinned. I sat in my car across the street and watched a man kneel in the mud at dawn trying to save plants that were already ruined. His face was blank. I did not feel triumphant. Something heavy in my chest told me I had walked past a line I would not easily unwalk. They intensified surveillance. Cameras on poles, a night watch hired from a private company, lights that stayed on all night. My neighbors complained about my presence at meetings. A child who used to wave when I passed avoided eye contact. I had become the cold center of a small storm. The board tried to get an injunction to force me from my house pending investigation. The judge assigned the case, read the filings, and told us to mediate. In that room with neutral walls and a clock that ticked like a metronome, I saw Clary's face up close for the first time without a backstage smile. Her jaw trembled slightly when she spoke. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she was relieved she had found ways to make people obey her. Fear looks the same no matter which side you sit on, the mediator suggested. We each produce a list of grievances and a plan for resolution. I gave him the ledger, the camera footage, the emails. He blinked. He had been in the business too long to be shocked, but his face said this was uglier than he expected. Outside the mediation room, someone had painted a message on a rock by the courthouse steps. It read, "Justice is blind." Someone had scrawled underneath, "But she peeks." The rock had been there for years. Someone new had added to it, "You can only hold your balance for so long. The law is patient, but people are not." I could feel the net tightening, small knot by small knot. The ladder in my shed had rusted in a place I had not seen. The photo under my mat had been moved. Someone was in my house when I was out. I put a camera in the hallway and watched the footage the next day. At 2:47 a.m., a figure moved past the living room, hand extended toward the mantel, fingers brushing the child's shoe. The person hesitated as if expecting a trap and then left. I am a judge. I have had people whisper threats in my ear across a bench. I have had families beg in a system that lunged and then spat them out. I have seen power abused from all sides. Now, the mirror showed a man in twilight, a man who held a legal hammer in one hand and a ladder in the other, unsure if he was fixing his house or tearing down a neighborhood by poking at its sore spots. And yet, every document I filed, every motion I made, was a little lighthouse. I sent records to the auditor. I called for transparency. I insisted on open meetings. Some neighbors came to me quietly and said thank you. Others spat my name under their breath and crossed the street. The town divided itself into two camps: those who wanted a small, orderly life, and those who feared the quiet terror of being told what to do by a private club. If this is a story about the law versus a small-town tyrant, then it is also a story about how fragile community is when its rules are weaponized. The ladder and the gavel are symbols, but the real thing that matters is the way people treat each other when no one is watching. Tonight, as I write this, I hear the distant hum of a car. My porch light is on. The camera shows movement in the yard, nothing I can name yet, but it is enough. The envelope is gone from the mat. The child's shoe remains on the mantel like a small, blunt accusation. I do not know what comes next. I know only that I cannot stop. Not now. Not after the photo. Not after the note. Not after the boots at 3:12 a.m. The shoe was still warm when I picked it up. That detail never left me. It meant whoever had been there had just left seconds, maybe. The porch light flickered once, humming louder than usual. I stood there in silence, waiting for my eyes to adjust. But the darkness beyond the yard was different tonight. Too still. Too patient. I whispered into the night, "Show yourself."
Nothing?
I stepped back inside, locked the door, and stared at the security monitors. Every camera was blank, static, as if someone had wiped them all clean. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. Someone knew what they were doing. Someone who understood systems, timing, access. Then came the sound, faint tapping from the attic. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Like a signal, I didn't move at first. The sound came again, slower this time. I grabbed the flashlight and walked to the hallway. Each step echoing like I was walking inside my own heartbeat. Halfway up the attic stairs, my phone buzzed. A new email, no sender, no subject. Just an attachment, a photo. I opened it. It was the same attic I was standing beneath, but taken from above. I froze. Whoever sent it was already there. I turned off the flashlight and listened. The silence was absolute, but silence is never empty. It's full of waiting. I took one step, then another. The ladder creaked. A faint breath, not mine, drifted through the gap above. When I pushed the attic door open, it was empty. Dust floated like falling snow, and the smell of something chemical hung in the air. Then I saw it, a trail of footprints in the dust, leading to the small circular window at the far end. On the glass, drawn with a fingertip, were 3 letters. HOA. I stood there staring, feeling the absurdity of it all, mixed with something darker. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was performance. Someone wanted me to feel the script they were writing around me. The next morning, I went through the neighborhood as if nothing had happened. People avoided me. Even the mailman crossed the street early. It was as if fear had become contagious. When I reached the end of the block, I saw her clearly, standing by her SUV, smiling like she hadn't slept in days but was running on pure spite. She waved. "Rough night, Judge?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her long enough for the smile to fade. She muttered something I couldn't hear, then drove off, tires screeching slightly on the curb. That day, I went to the county clerk's office to review HOA filings. I told them I was doing an internal audit. The clerk looked nervous when I gave the name of the association. "There's something odd," she said. "Your HOA's bylaws were amended 2 weeks ago." Quietly. "By who?" She hesitated, then whispered, "By you." My pulse spiked. I grabbed the document, and there it was. My electronic signature, my seal, my name. I had never signed it. The new amendment gave Cleary full financial discretion and immunity from removal. Pending judicial review. Someone had forged the judge's authority, my authority, to protect themselves. I printed the file and walked out without saying a word. My thoughts blurred. Every corner of the building felt like it was watching me. That night, the air in my house felt heavier. I sat at the desk, comparing timestamps and digital certificates. Whoever did this had access to restricted systems. They knew the law or worked close enough to it to fake it. Then my laptop camera turned on by itself. The little green light blinked, but the screen stayed black. I turned the computer around, nothing there. But the reflection on the dark screen showed a faint silhouette behind me. For just a second, when I turned, no one. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not from her, not from the HOA, but from the idea that I wasn't dealing with individuals anymore. This was organized. Layered, the next few days came in fragments, flashes of memory, dream, and dread. I'd wake up at my desk. Papers scattered. The door ajar. Once, I woke to find my gavel sitting on my kitchen counter, perfectly centered, as if it had been placed there for display. Then came the calls. Always the same number, always silent. The kind of silence that feels like someone breathing through the other end. I tried to trace it. It led nowhere. I started recording everything. I left the cameras running, voice notes, timestamps, even the sounds of my own footsteps. I thought I was building a case, but it felt more like leaving breadcrumbs in a maze I was already lost in. Then, 3 days later, I got a letter from the court. Suspension pending investigation. They accused me of judicial misconduct, the forgery, the unauthorized injunction, conflict of interest. Everything turned upside down. I was now the subject of an ethics inquiry. My colleagues avoided eye contact. The clerk wouldn't meet me in the hallway. Even my assistant quit. The walls that once represented justice now looked like they were closing in. Suffocating me with irony, I sat in the empty courtroom one evening, listening to the echo of my own breath, and realized how fast power can vanish when people believe a lie. That's when I saw it etched on the back of my own bench, scratched into the wood like a warning. Clean what you cannot see. I ran my fingers over the letters. The wood was rough, uneven. Someone had done this recently. Suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about rules or law. It was about control. The HOA wasn't trying to punish me. They were trying to rewrite me, erase the judge until only the story they built remained. And the scariest part? It was working. Asterisk. I don't remember driving home that night. Just the hum of tires and the taste of metal in my mouth, fear, realization, something in between. The city lights blurred together like streaks of guilt. When I pulled into the driveway, every light in my house was already on. I hadn't left them that way. Inside, the air was too warm, too heavy. My papers were rearranged. My chair turned toward the window, and on the glass, faint fingerprints. Someone had been sitting there, watching the street. The attic door was open again. I almost laughed. It wasn't humor, more like disbelief breaking under its own weight. I walked upstairs slowly, each creak of the steps echoing like a countdown. The attic was empty, but this time there was something new. A recorder. My own voice played from it, distorted, looped. I never imagined a quiet Sunday morning could turn into a legal nightmare. It was me. My voice from the beginning of this story. Someone had been recording everything, even the parts that were supposed to be private. I turned the device off and stared at it. That's when I noticed the smell chlorine again, faint but distinct. The water, the hose, the panels. Whoever was doing this was repeating the first moment. Turning it into a ritual, I started piecing it together. The forgery, the surveillance, the fear. They wanted me to collapse under the weight of my own credibility. A judge who loses his sanity loses his power. They weren't destroying me legally, they were destroying me psychologically. I didn't sleep that night. The house groaned and whispered. I sat by the window, the recorder on the table beside me, the child's shoe next to it. I looked outside at the still neighborhood and tried to count how many windows were watching me back then. Around 3 a.m. a light flicked on across the street, Cleary's house. She stood there in her window, arms crossed, looking directly at me. No movement, no expression. Just staring. I stood too. We held eye contact for maybe a minute, maybe an hour. Then her light went out. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Fear turned into focus. The next day I went to my office and locked the door. I started writing affidavits records, every incident logged with precision. I wasn't just building a case anymore. I was constructing a mirror for them to see themselves in. That afternoon, I drove to the county's internal audit department. I requested logs for all HOA-related digital submissions over the last 6 months. The officer on duty raised an eyebrow. "Judge, those records are sealed," he said. "Not from me," I replied. He hesitated, then printed the list. I thanked him, but he didn't meet my eyes. Maybe he knew something I didn't. Back home, I went through the logs line by line. 3 submissions were made from my credentials, all at 2:17 a.m., weeks apart. Same IP address. Not from my house. From the HOA office. They'd been using my access to sign their own documents, to legitimize their own crimes. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Then I noticed something small but chilling. Each forged file had a hidden metadata tag with a 3-letter code. HOA. It wasn't arrogance. It was a brand. A signature. I leaned back and whispered, "You left fingerprints." And fingerprints are what judges live for. I packaged everything. The photos. The audio recordings, the forged amendments, the metadata. It took me 3 days. On the 4th, I sent it all anonymously to the state attorney's office. With one sentence attached, "When the law is mocked, the law learns how to laugh back." Then I waited days past. Nothing. Asterisk. Then one morning the silence broke. A convoy of black SUVs pulled into the neighborhood. Agents, not cops. Federal. I watched from my window as they swarmed the HOA office. Carrying out boxes of files and electronics, neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering. For the first time, no one avoided me. Hours later, Cleary was led out in handcuffs. Even then, she smiled. Not a broken smile, an unrepentant one. She turned her head and found my window. Our eyes met for the last time. She mouthed something I couldn't hear, but I understood it anyway. "This isn't over." The agents left. The sun set. The street went quiet again. That night, I sat outside for the first time in weeks. The sky was clear. I looked up at the solar panels, clean, shining, silent. The house breathed like it was finally at peace. Then the porch light flickered again. Once, twice, and from the corner of the yard, a sound. A single, deliberate click. A camera shutter. I froze. Slowly, I turned toward the bushes. Nothing. I checked my phone, no photo, no message. But deep down, I knew the game hadn't ended. Power never disappears. It just changes hands. Maybe she wasn't working alone. Maybe the HOA was only one face of something larger. Or maybe this was the price of knowing too much, the law turning inward, reflecting on itself until it devours its own. I sat there until dawn, half expecting another siren, another shadow. None came, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was alive. I started to laugh again, quietly this time, because I finally understood what Cleary had meant. It's never over, not when fear becomes a language. Everyone learns to speak, and as the first light touched the panels above me, I whispered to no one in particular. You wanted control. You built your kingdom on rules. Now, you'll live inside mine. I stood, brushed the dust from my hands, and walked inside. The house felt lighter. The documents were gone. The evidence delivered. Justice, for now, balanced. But as I closed the door, something caught my eye on the floor. A small white envelope. No name. No address. Inside a single photo. Not of me. Of the courthouse. Empty. except for one figure sitting on my bench smiling, holding my gavel. The lights in the photo spelled 3 letters in the reflection above the judge's seat. HOA. The porch light flickered again, and I realized the case was never about the law. It was about ownership of homes, of minds, of narratives. And maybe they'd already won. Asterisk, I used to believe closure was real, that one day you wake up, the storm is gone, and everything that broke inside you somehow knows how to breathe again. But closure is just another illusion dressed in calm. It's been 3 months since the raid. The HOA dissolved, Cleary vanished into the system, and my name was finally cleared. But peace. No, peace never came. It just changed its clothes. The mornings feel too quiet now. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder what's missing. Sometimes when I pour my coffee, I still expect to hear that distant hum of patrol cars or the rustle of someone watching from across the street. But all I get is silence. The thing about silence is it remembers. I tried to go back to work. Tried to sit on the bench again, wearing that robe that used to mean authority, protection, truth. But when I looked down at the people in front of me, the accused, the witnesses, the liars, I saw reflections of them. I saw Cleary's smirk in a defense attorney's twitch. I saw the HOA's smug confidence in every loophole. And I realized something that broke me a little more than I'd like to admit. Justice isn't blind. It's exhausted. I resigned a week later. Quietly. No headlines. No farewells. Just a signature and an empty courtroom. I told myself it was temporary. But deep down, I knew it was. One night, while packing up my office, I found the envelope again. The one with the courthouse photo. I never told anyone about it. Not the investigators. Not the agents. Not even my sister, who still calls every night to ask if I'm okay. I kept it locked away in my desk drawer, because something about it didn't feel finished. The person sitting on my bench, that smile, it wasn't Cleary. It wasn't anyone I knew. But there was something familiar in the posture, the tilt of the head, the stillness. It looked like me. I laughed when I noticed it the first time. It had to be edited, right? A trick, a threat. But the longer I stared at it, the more I couldn't tell. Was it really me? Or just someone who wanted me to believe it was? That night, I had the first dream in it. I was back on the roof, cleaning the solar panels. The sunlight was blinding, the wind sharp. Below me, a crowd gathered, faceless figures in HOA badges, chanting something I couldn't understand. Then one by one, they lifted their phones, taking photos, until every flash merged into a single blinding light. When the light faded, I wasn't on the roof anymore. I was back in the courtroom. Except this time, I wasn't the judge. I was the defendant. And the person holding the gavel was Cleary. When I woke up, the power was out. No sound. No hum. Just the tick of the clock, and then a faint creak from the attic. I didn't go up there. Not that night. But the next morning, curiosity outweighed fear. I climbed the stairs slowly, heart drumming in my throat. The attic was cold, empty, but there was something new on the floor, another envelope. No stamp, no writing. Inside, a printed note. 7 words. You cleaned the panels. We cleaned you. My hands trembled. I looked around. No cameras, no footprints, nothing disturbed. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever sent that message was closer than I thought. I took the note and burned it. Watched the words twist and vanish. But the smoke. The smoke smelled like chlorine again. I moved out of the house a week later. Sold it to a young couple who smiled too easily. They didn't ask about the past, and I didn't offer it. I left them the panels, the yard, everything. All except the recorder. That I kept. Sometimes I play it when I can't sleep. It's mostly empty now, just static and distant hums. But once, I swear I heard something else. A voice. A whisper. We own the sunlight. I threw the recorder across the room that night. But the next morning it was back on the table beside my bed, neatly placed, as if it never moved. I started writing everything down again. Every sound, every flicker of light, every car that parked too long outside. Not because I was paranoid, but because I needed proof that I wasn't imagining all this. Days blurred into each other. I stopped answering calls, stopped checking mail. Even the sound of the doorbell made my skin crawl. Then one evening, while watching the sunset through the blinds, I saw her again. Cleary standing across the street. Not in cuffs, not in uniform. Just standing, wearing a pale dress, her hair tied back, holding something small in her hand. A phone, she raised it slowly, flash, and she was gone. I ran outside, but the street was empty. Just the echo of the camera click, floating like a memory I didn't ask for. That night, the dreams got worse. Sometimes I'm back in the courtroom. Sometimes I'm in the attic. Sometimes I'm underwater, the panels above me like black mirrors, the light bleeding through them like slow golden rain. And in all of them, I hear the same voice. You built your kingdom on light, but light belongs to those who watch. Tried moving again. Different state, different name on the mailbox. It didn't help. The mail still finds me. Every few weeks, another envelope. No message this time, just a photograph. Sometimes it's my house. Sometimes my reflection. Sometimes it's just a window. I started to wonder if maybe this isn't revenge anymore. Maybe it's an initiation. I used to think the HOA was about power, rules, control, order. Now I think it was something deeper. A system that feeds on obedience. A quiet machine that rewrites reality until everyone inside it forgets who they were. Maybe Cleary wasn't the villain. Maybe she was just another prisoner who learned how to hold the keys. One night, I decided to test it. I printed one of the photos, drew a red circle over the figure, over the version of me that wasn't me, and pinned it to the wall. Then I waited. At midnight, the light flickered again. Once, twice. Then the photo fell. I picked it up and froze. The red circle was gone. And now, the figure in the photo was looking at me. Not straight ahead anymore. Not at the camera. At me. That was the night I stopped running. I realized then, can't fight something that doesn't exist in one place. The HOA wasn't just a group. It was a network of watchers built from fear and control, thriving wherever people surrender small pieces of themselves in the name of peace. And I had surrendered everything. So I went back to the neighborhood, back to the street where it all started. My old house was there, brighter, cleaner, quieter. The new owners waved. The woman smiled like she'd never known fear. I waved back. Then I noticed the panels on the roof, gleaming, and something written across one in faint marker. Visible only in the reflection of the setting sun, you kept them clean. My knees went weak. I smiled. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe acceptance. Because for the first time, I understood the truth. You can clean away dirt, but not memory. You can fight control, but not the need for it. The HOA didn't destroy me, it just showed me the blueprint. Now, when I look at people at how they follow rules, how they judge, how they hide behind laws and signatures, I see the same pattern. We're all part of a larger HOA, the kind you can't quit, the kind that owns you long before you buy your first home, the kind that teaches you obedience wrapped in comfort, the kind that whispers, "We own the sunlight." So when I left that day, I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because in every reflection, in every clean surface, I still see the truth that control doesn't vanish. It just waits for you to stop watching, and somewhere, behind every fence, every rule book, every perfectly painted mailbox, someone's keeping score, someone who knows your address, someone who already owns.
Light.
You're light, so if you're hearing this, if you've watched till now, don't just like this video, remember it. Because maybe, one day, you'll clean your panels. And they'll call the cops on you. And that's when you'll realize you were never the homeowner. You were always the property. If this story made your heart race, if it made you look at your world a little differently, stay till the end of this channel. Because the truth doesn't live in the courtroom. It lives in the neighborhoods we think we own,